There's this one metal that most of us never really think about. It's not flashy like gold or dramatic like oil, but honestly, it's the thing that makes our entire modern world tick. We're talking about copper and a potential future where our biggest plans are held back, not by a lack of ideas, but by a shortage of this one single material. Okay, let's get into it. So, a lot of people feel like they missed the boat on things like silver, right? They see the headlines way after the big move has already happened. But what if the signals for the next huge story weren't buried in some complex financial report, but were actually just sitting there in plain sight, rooted in simple math? Well, that's kind of where we find ourselves with copper. Before we dive in, I want to be crystal clear about something. This is not about hype. We're not talking about price targets or get-rich-quick trades. This is about reality. We're going to break down the hard facts: supply, demand, the timelines you just can't change, and the basic physics of how our world works. This is all about understanding what could be one of the most important strategic materials of the next decade. All right, so why all the fuss about copper? I mean, what's the big deal? Well, because even though we barely notice it, we are completely surrounded by it, and we depend on it for, well, almost everything. And that's not an exaggeration, not even a little bit. From the wires in your house to the phone in your hand, copper is the quiet workhorse. It's basically the circulatory system for our entire electric economy. But right now, there are three huge simultaneous trends putting an unbelievable amount of pressure on it. So check this out. First up, EVs. Your average electric car, it uses like 4 times more copper than a regular gas guzzler. Second, our power grids. Every time we upgrade the grid or connect a new solar farm, it's basically just a massive copper project. And third, the AI explosion. All those new data centers are being called giant copper sponges because they just soak up incredible amounts of the metal. Any one of these things would be a big deal, but all three happening at once, that's a true demand shock. And all that new demand? Well, it's heading straight for a brick wall. And we're not talking about some minor little mismatch here. The data is pointing toward a full-on collision. Take a look at this chart from S&P Global. It just lays it all out so clearly. That blue line shooting up, that's demand. Now look at the pink line, that's supply. See how it just kind of flattens out and is even projected to start falling after 2030? Yeah, those two lines are going in completely different directions. And this is what that actually looks like. This is the result. This chart shows the gap, the shortfall, in millions of tons. You can see it starts to open up around 2027, and then whoosh, it just gets wider and wider through the 2030s. This isn't some small gap the market can just fix easily. So what does this all boil down to? One number, really. 10 million tons. That's the projected deficit by the year 2040. To give you some perspective, that's almost a third of what the entire world uses today. It's a massive, massive number. And that's why you're hearing experts say this isn't just a shortage anymore. A shortage feels temporary, like something the market can sort out. A collision, well, that feels a lot more structural, more inevitable. It's something that's already locked in by trends that are in motion right now. Okay, so let's unpack that collision. First, let's look at the demand side. Just how huge is this surge we're talking about? The numbers here are just staggering. We're looking at global demand jumping from about 28 million tons today to around 42 million tons by 2040. That's a 50% increase in just 15 years. This isn't just business as usual, it's a major acceleration. And where is all this happening? The epicenter is Asia. We're talking about 60% of all that new demand coming from there. And it's because you have these massive forces, building new cities, upgrading power grids, and switching to EVs, all happening at the same time in the same part of the world. And then there's a wild card, the thing that's quietly piling on top of everything else, the AI boom. Data centers, chips, cooling systems, all of it needs a ton of copper. It's projected that copper demand from just data centers is set to more than double by 2040. Okay, so demand is going through the roof. The obvious question is, why can't we just, mine more? And that brings us to the other side of the equation, the supply wall. This is where the real world and its inconvenient timelines come into play. Well, the reality is you can't just print a copper mine. It doesn't work that way. From the moment you find a new deposit to the day you actually get metal out of the ground, we're talking 10 to 18 years. A decade or more of navigating politics, getting permits, and building these massive, complex projects. And here's the kicker. We're not exactly starting from a great position. Existing mines are getting old. The quality of copper in the ground is actually going down, which means you have to dig up way more rock to get the same amount of metal. Plus, we keep seeing big disruptions in key countries like Chile. All of this adds up to one stark prediction. The total supply from mines is expected to peak around 2030, right when demand is really taking off. So, you put those two things together, this insane, locked-in demand and a supply chain that's basically stuck in slow motion, and the whole picture changes. This stops being just another story about markets. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Okay, but won't higher prices just fix this? Basic economics? And the answer is yeah, eventually. But the problem is, eventually might be too late. The physical world just can't move that fast. And that's how a simple commodity becomes something much more, an infrastructure constraint, a bottleneck. It becomes the one thing that decides how fast we can actually build the future we want. And that, right there, is how something becomes a strategic commodity. It's not born from hype or panic. It's born from simple, slow, undeniable math. It's a material that's absolutely essential and a supply that just can't be rushed. You can't negotiate with physics or timelines. Which brings us to a really powerful idea. We like to think that progress is only limited by our imagination, but this is a huge reminder that the future is also limited by something much more basic, the actual stuff we need to build it. So, I want to leave you with one final image to tie this all together. If electricity is the bloodstream of the modern economy, the thing that powers everything we do, then copper is the artery. And if that artery gets clogged, everything else starts to back up. And just to say it one last time, this is not financial advice. Short-term markets are going to do what they do. They're wild and unpredictable. The whole point here is to look beyond the daily market noise, to understand the big physical forces that could really shape the world we're all going to be living in. Thanks for tuning in.